We can now bring in Jim Shields, Professor of French Politics at Warwick. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. The French President Emmanuel Macron, some say, has an image problem with voters. Many think he's arrogant, out of touch. Are these things he can change in 2 weeks' time?
That's a big question. He's had 5 years to work on it, and he hasn't made great improvement, although he would claim to have made some. Until very recently, very recently, he tried to sit above the fray. He tried to enter the campaign as late as possible, and he left it a bit too late. And you could tell there was an element of panic in his camp before yesterday's vote. He's now down among the mortals, and he will have to campaign hard over the next 2 weeks. Macron and Le Pen have qualified, but that's the easy bit done. They've got 27 and 23% of the vote each. They now, respectively, each now needs to try to build a majority. And they need for that to look for reserves. Macron can reach across the centre right and the centre left. But how far will leftist voters who are disappointed with the Macron style that you've just alluded to, who are disappointed with the rightward bias of Macron's first term, how far will they rally this time to see him over the line? So Macron has one would say, an easier task than Le Pen to bring together the necessary coalition for a majority, but it's not an easy task. And there are three big imponderables that I'll rehearse quickly. One, abstention in the second round. This will be high. And the question is, who will be hit harder by it? Two, how will Jean-Luc Mélenchon's 22% break for Macron, for Le Pen, for abstention? And three, a key question, what will be the number of voters who support Macron to keep out Le Pen, or who vote for Le Pen to kick out Macron?
Because that's something I wanted to ask you. Macron has run his presidency over the past 5 years, knowing full well he's going to face off against Marine Le Pen in the second round of this vote. And look at what's happened. We are where we are. Given that he has managed to alienate voters from the left, last night I was covering the Socialist Party headquarters, and a lot of the people, when Macron started talking, were not happy. We're not happy that they have to go in 2 weeks' time and vote for him just to block Marine Le Pen. And voters who have voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far left, are not. I doubt they're going to go voluntarily and vote for Emmanuel Macron just to block Marine Le Pen. It's not a given anymore.
It's not a given anymore. That's absolutely true. Macron starts this fight as the favourite, but he does have a fight on his hands. He is a beleaguered incumbent now. He's no longer the candidate of hope and change that he once was. People have seen up close what Macron is like as president, and many of them do not like it. He is setting out, it's clear today, to insist on the dangers of electing Marine Le Pen. But that won't be enough. He has to defend his record in power, and he has to set out a clear vision of where he wants to take France next. So far, he has not done this convincingly. And there was a time when Macron could rely on what was called the Republican front. Everyone else gathering behind him to see off the far right. That no longer applies in the same way. There will be an anti-Le Pen front for sure, but there will also be, in this second round, an anti-Macron front.
Because a lot of people want to teach Emmanuel Macron a lesson.
That's true. A lot of people would want to bring Macron down a peg or two, and they're faced with a terrible dilemma. Do they go with their personal instinct and their personal dislike of Macron, of which there is a great deal across the voting public in France, or do they go with their head if they feel that Macron is the better option for a president who can do the job rather than a big risk on an unknown quantity in Le Pen, with all that she stands for and all the baggage that she brings?
How is it that social democrats in parts of Europe, pockets of Europe, I should say, have managed to do well, whereas in France, I mean, last night the Socialist Party, they got barely 2% of the vote, 1.7% of the vote. Whereas in France, it seems that the conversation has shifted to the right. We're talking about migration, we're talking about security. Why is that?
Well, I'm going to take a French perspective on this, and I think it's a really big question that you ask. Two things come out of yesterday's vote that are huge. The first is the vote for the extremes, with over 50%, well over 50% for candidates of far left and far right. And with 33% for far right candidates alone, they are the biggest electoral grouping. The second thing that comes out is the pitiful showing of the traditional parties of government, the social democratic left, the socialists, and the centre-right Republicans, who together failed to total 7%. This is a crushing, a humiliating low for once dominant parties that now confront existential crisis. The rematch between Macron and Le Pen is an indictment of a French political establishment that has failed to renew itself in the 5 years since Macron came to power, both the social democratic left and the centre-right. Having promised on the evening of his election in 2017 to remove the reasons for voting for the extremes, Macron finds himself now confronting a devastated political landscape where only the extremes of both right and left present an alternative to his centrist administration. And if I can also add, the meltdown of the socialists and the Republicans in France shows the gaping disparity between politics at the top and politics at the base in France. The Republicans govern 7 of France's 12 mainland regions. The socialists govern the other 5. Between them, they govern almost all of the 96 departments and almost all towns. Yet they face extinction as presidential parties. This is a political world turned upside down.
Indeed, it is. But I want to go back to Jean-Luc Mélenchon again, because he seems to have taken in. He's gotten over 20% of the vote share. This is votes that would traditionally go to the center right, the center left. How did he do it? How is he getting all those young people to go out and vote for him and not, for example, go to the Greens?
What Mélenchon really managed to mobilize, and it was late in the day when he got enough traction to do this, what he really managed to mobilize was a vote utile, a tactical vote. Many of those who went for Mélenchon, some very belatedly, did it as a way of getting or trying to get a figure from the left into the second round. It was clear that Anne Hidalgo, Yannick Jadot, and the others didn't have a prayer. So a lot of the votes that would have gone to them went to Mélenchon. And he just almost got ahead of Le Pen. Had Fabien Roussel, the communist, not stood, Mélenchon would be in the second round right now against Macron and not Le Pen.
I mean, the thing is, when we think of the traditional parties, we had the center-left party who've had to sell off their campaign headquarters in the 7th arrondissement of Paris and move to the suburbs. Now the Republican Party will have to scramble for cash. It's interesting times, as you said. Jim Shields, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure.